Hey, what's going on, y'all? Eric Moser here with Code Red Conversations. Thanks for joining me. Yeah, sorry. I think I might have been running a minute or so late. I apologize for that, but had a few technical issues I had to deal with, as always. Those of y'all who've been sticking around with me know that I'm never too far from dealing with technical issues on occasion. But again, I appreciate y'all stepping in and joining me. If everything is good, if y'all can hear me well, comment and hit me up in the chat. Comment and let me know my audio, my sound's good, and the video's good. I would greatly appreciate it. But as you saw, once again, I don't shy away from the controversy here at Code Red Conversations when it comes to topics. My mindset isn't, I don't go into these lives when I think about the discussions I want to have or things like that. I don't go into them thinking that I want to be controversial. I just really don't. But I do desire to be open and honest. That is probably my greatest passion here. Let me get rid of this. That is my biggest passion. My desire is not just to, hey, CJ, hey, appreciate that. Thank you very much. I don't go into these conversations with the goal of simply being controversial or getting people talking. I honestly, truly don't. But what I do desire is to discuss some of these claims, popular claims, and see if they hold any water. And this episode is no different. One of the popular, I don't know if you want to say tropes or claims that we often hear in the media. Let me share the screen with y'all real quick. One of the popular claims that we hear in the media, and there was a time where I kind of believed it, is this. Let me get back to my screen here. Is this. My main thumbnail kind of points this whole thing out. Here you have pictures of white gunmen. You got Dylan Roof, got James Holmes, Jared Loughner. These three individuals were all active shooters, all killers, all mass murderers. And the one thing they all have in common, well, they're still alive, and they were all arrested, quote unquote, without incident. Now, one of the popular claims, more common claims that you'll hear is that when white folks they can be arrested for the most heinous of crimes and nothing will happen to them. But let a black person can get gunned down for wearing a hoodie. That's what they'll say. Or jogging, or having a air freshener in his rear view mirror, even though we know that there's more things involved. And I just use those random cases, but you hear that often. So I just started thinking about it. And I said, okay, well, let's examine that. That's a popular claim. Let's see if it holds any water. Let's see if there's any truth to that. Because again, going back to this main photo, you have Dylan Roof. He was a shooter out of Charleston, South Carolina, went to the church, killed a bunch of black folks for no apparent reason other than I think he claimed that he wanted to start a race war or something silly, ridiculous like that, and just gunned down a bunch of people who showed him love and nothing but respect and appreciation. And he ended up slaughtering almost all of them, totally unnecessarily. And then you have Jared Loughner. He was a shooter in Arizona. And then you have James Holmes. He his stands out because I remember the night. That was when one of the Batman movies came out, and it was in Colorado. And he shot up the movie theater, killing a whole bunch of folks. So let's not waste a whole lot of time here. Let me get to let's just dive in and see if this claim holds any water whatsoever. Let's take a look at this real quick. As a matter of fact, let me just watch this one video, play this one video, and it goes into a little detail about Loughner. Kind of shares, kind of breaks, kind of goes, it says into the mind of a serial killer. So this should be kind of interesting. All right, here we go.
Is a date we will never forget in Tucson. Congress Corner event turned into a horrific crime scene in a mass shooting. And tonight we are digging into the minds of killers like Jared Loughner, people who pull the trigger in some of the most horrific mass shootings in history.
So what can be done to stop these shootings? Our Brianna Whitney has been investigating who many of these shooters are, and some appear to have a common link.
I saw him shoot.
First shot went off.
He was on that side.
He left everything for people to see for a reason. He wanted the world to know what he thought. Because he thought that's how it is in his head is how the world was.
He was her childhood friend. Eventually, he was her boyfriend. Ashley Figueroa didn't know high school without Jared.
Did you know you were dating a future mass shooter? Did you ever think that?
At the time, no. I would have never thought that whatsoever.
In 2011, Ashley watched her TV as Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was rushed to the hospital, shot in the head at an event. 6 people died, many more were injured, all at the hands of then 22-year-old Jared Loughner, Ashley's ex-boyfriend.
What if it was something earlier? What if he had done a shooting at the school? I might not be here today for all I know.
She says, looking back now, the signs were there. Loughner felt the government and world were against him.
When he was talking about his conspiracy theories, he's very passionate about it. You could, see him shaking sometimes because he was so angry about something, and I was just like, okay.
I've covered 2 of these mass shootings. In 2014, I was sent to Santa Barbara, California, after Elliot Rodger killed 6 people. And then just 3 years later, I was a reporter in Texas and was sent to the Sutherland Springs mass shooting that left 26 people dead in a church. And as a reporter, you get to these scenes and you're interviewing people, and they're devastated and heartbroken. And you hear the same thing every single time. I never thought he could do this.
What's happening to boys today is scary, it's sad, it's tragic, but what's even more tragic is that we are ignoring it.
Good book, by the way, The Boy Crisis. I have that book, and I haven't finished it completely, but what I did read, especially the first few chapters, goes into a lot of detail as to the neglect when it comes to young men, boys in general, and how a culture is kind of manipulating them to think a certain way. Very, very powerful book. I highly recommend it.
Dr. Warren Farrell, author of The Boy Crisis, has been studying this for decades. He says girls do better in school, have better self-esteem. They aren't the problem. It's the boys who grow up wanting to be the star football player, the hero firefighter, the picture of masculinity. And the mass shooters appear to be one and the same: young, white, loners who don't fit this mold.
And we're going to talk a little bit, not in a whole lot of detail on this one, about these young white males, the assumption that they are the predominant killers. I'll touch on that a little bit, but not in much detail, not in this one. I'm going to save that for another live because that's a whole separate topic in and of itself.
White males, especially suburban males, tend to have expectations put on them. And so they feel a lot of shame when they disappoint those expectations.
That's when he says the problems start, but he says it's bigger than that. It comes down to something so important, but something no one can see from the outside.
We see in almost all the mass shooters the similarity of dad deprivation, which
Mm.
leads to a boy feeling ashamed of himself, withdrawing, becoming angry that nobody likes him, pays attention to him, is proud of him.
And as he looked into many of these mass shooters' pasts, he found that same link.
Now let's look at this, for instance. Let's take this into consideration. I'm about to stop the video because I don't want to get too far off my primary topic. But when we look at the culture nowadays, where you see this de-emphasis on masculinity, where the term toxic masculinity is thrown around a lot, and it's not just if a guy is abusive, it's used in areas where somebody who wants to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps, they want to be tough, they want to quote unquote suck it up, they might have a desire to be in the military or do tough things or do hard things. That is what's looked upon these days in our society as quote unquote toxic masculinity. And the male role model, and this has been going on for decades. I was having a recent conversation with some family members and some friends talking about the emasculating that is occurring in our culture when it comes to boys, when it comes to men. It's in our TV shows. You can go all the way back to the Honeymooners, the Flintstones, all the way up to Everybody Loves Raymond and The Simpsons, you name it. What you see typically is the bumbling idiot dad who doesn't know what he's doing. And you see this emphasis on the mom. She's the one who keeps the family all together. And that's just not always the case. And it really irritates me how much that is emphasized. But let me back up real quick and make sure I stay on topic because I'm really passionate about this one. Matter of fact, I think I might have to come back and do a live talking about the emasculation in our culture and the impact that it has on males in general. Even though I know that doesn't have a direct tie to policing, but I think there could be a correlation, as this video is pointing out, because you see consistently how these young men end up acting out. They end up acting out violently. Not in very few occasions. It's the rare occasion where that happens, but you see it in all cultures. You see it within the Black community, Hispanic community, white community, when there's such a de-emphasis on the role of the father. Young men acting out is a prime example. But let me please stay on topic. Well, I see people are commenting in the comments here, so I want to see what folks have to say. Michael Payton says Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was actually presumed to have shot one of the detectives. Yeah, bro, and was taken in unharmed. Trust me, before this live is over, I will have dealt with that argument, and I think pretty handily by the time I'm done here. But yeah, I agree, man. There are so many cases where Black men are taken into custody and they have heinous records, violent histories, committed violent crimes. But you don't hear about it because the media doesn't talk about it. But before I get too deep into that, let's check out some of the other comments. But that was definitely good. Boys should want to be masculine, regardless of skin color. Amen, bro. And you would think that something as simple and common sense as that, something like that would be just common sense, and everyone would know it. But man, that's just not where we are as a society today. People are afraid to speak out and just say what you just said on a large scale because they know they'll get a lot of pushback, especially on social media. It's nuts, man. I mean, it truly is nuts where we are. But again, as a culture that drifts further and further away from a biblical order, this is what you get. How else can you articulate the rationality of fatherhood, malehood, and womanhood, and how we're separate and we're distinct and we have different functions and roles? It doesn't make anyone better. We just have different functions and roles in a society and within the family unit. But talking like that, people want to act like you're an idiot. And it's just really nuts. God created us to be providers and protectors by nature. It's when either family or outside influences such as public schools, indoctrination, instilling otherwise. Nailed it, bro. Completely nailed it. Thank you, honey. I do my best. Take away masculinity from the beginning, creation, and who is tending the garden, building the ark, and so on. Right. That man went to school and shot up a school, actually went home the same day and had a party thrown for him. You're talking about that young black kid in Texas. I don't know if he got out the same day, but even if he did, you're right. He got out and he was made initially in the media to be the victim, if I recall correctly, because his mom or some of his family members were claiming that he was being bullied. And he just retaliated because that's I'm pretty sure that's what he told his family, that he was being attacked, he was being bullied, and he had to defend himself. Lo and behold, not that it was a shock to anybody with any common sense, was that he was living that life, trying to act like a thug. I think he might have been selling drugs. The local sheriff's department came out and said that he was basically living a life of crime, and that shooting had nothing at all to do with the fact that he was being bullied. Nothing at all. You and I have taken many into custody without incident, bro. On many occasions. Murder suspects, homicide suspects, murderers, sex offenders. I can go on and on, man, about the people I've taken into custody who were just no good. Dudes wanted from other states. And I say, honestly, without delving into all the facts and stats and actual cases, which I'm going to get into, let's look at the reality of the criminal justice system. One of the biggest complaints by those who are advocates for abolishing law enforcement, abolishing the police, dismantling basically the entire criminal justice system, especially the jails and the prisons. One of their chief arguments is the fact that there are so many Black men locked up. And we can have a conversation about that, even though I believe that it's primarily, and I think the data goes along with it, it's because of the fact that we unfortunately have a tendency to commit more violent crime. I think you can go back decades with the FBI Uniform Crime Report, and you can see that to be the case. You can examine the information that we get from the Washington Post police shooting database. When they talk about, when you read the articles of what actually went down prior to the shooting, when you actually look at some of the statistics and studies that the Washington Post did themselves, a very left-leaning newspaper, where it's demonstrated that these individuals, 90% of them roughly, were in possession of some form of a weapon when they were shot by the police. So you're not having people just going to jail just because. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people in jail who are innocent. I'm not saying that at all. But honestly, when I worked the prison system, I rarely ever heard anyone say that they were innocent. I don't recall ever hearing someone say that. And I've had thousands of conversations with convicts over the years. I don't recall one time any one of them telling me that they were innocent victims. Most of the time what you heard was, yeah, man, they never caught me for half the stuff I really did. I heard that more often than not. So, but if more black men are getting shot, most of us, as some may claim, simply because of our skin color, then if that was an actual fact, then the prison system wouldn't be as overpopulated as it is. So their arguments fall on themselves automatically. It's just, there's really no basis for it. Excuse me. He did get out the same day, but now he has violated the conditions and he's in jail now. Okay. If you have a link, I would love to read it. If you can put that in the comments, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you. He did bail out the same day. Okay, claimed bullying, and it turns out that he was the bully. Right. I definitely recall him claiming going the bully route. But let's step back here. And once again, for those of you who are jumping in, I appreciate y'all being here. We're having a pretty hot we're not having a heated discussion. Everybody in the chat is pretty much is in agreement from what I see. But I know this is a hot topic, and I know people get very passionate about this topic. The claim that you can have a white person who could slaughter a school, gun people down in the church, and they'll be arrested without incident, taken to Burger King or McDonald's to get something to eat or something to drink. But a black person can get arrested for next to nothing to get gunned down. I see CJ posted that in the link in the chat. Thank you very much, y'all. I'll definitely hold on to that because I want to read that up. Thank you again. So let's, again, I think that what I'm going to share, this is primarily one article, and I'm going to scroll through, and I'm just going to read these numbers off, and I'll let it speak for itself. But let's go. As I grab this link, I wish StreamYard had it to where you could just have like 5 or 6 things stacked up. You can do 2, but no more than that. All right, where are we? Okay. All right, here we go. Now, this should be interesting. Let's scroll up to the top here. And let's just work our way through this list, shall we? And do yourself a favor. Feel free to use this video. I do plan on chopping it up, making it a little shorter down the road. So, because I typically go an hour and a half with my lives. But I do plan on chopping up little sections of this to make it a little easier for people to share so we can dispel some of these false claims. But here we go. List of 20 famous black serial killers. All right. We'll just work our way through this list here. These aren't white dudes running and gunning, shooting up communities. Let me start off. When one thinks about serial killers, one may conjure up images of a devious-looking white male or a lonely, reclusive lady. The majority of documented serial killers in the United States are white men. In the United States of America, however, there are at least a number of confirmed black serial killers. And we're not even going to touch on the issue when it comes down to mass shootings. I do have an article posted up. I'll probably touch on it a little bit. That goes into detail as to the rising number of mass shootings taking place in the inner city. And we know as a fact that most people kill folks that are in close proximity to them. So white people typically kill more white people. Black people typically kill more black people. So we have a growing number of mass shootings taking place in black communities. It would only, you would only come to you can only come to the reasonable conclusion that there's a growing number of black mass shooters, even though I think that oftentimes how these numbers are examined, they don't take into account drive-by shootings. And I even read an article that said in many lists that examine mass shootings, they don't discuss the ones where the shooter is unknown, or not say the shooter is unknown, but where there's very little community help. And I can see on one end why that may be, because you may not have all the facts and details, but I think that there are many cases where you can find out a lot if people just did a little more research. But when it comes down to suspects, you hear a lot of suspect information. Oh, he was a black dude driving this car. They may not give any more details than that, but I think that would be a good place to start. And it would help you get a more accurate number. Okay, the majority of documented serial, okay, I read that already. Some of the renowned criminals on the murder list cases involving black men or African-American serial killers employed guns, while others preferred knives and other sharp objects. Many of the most well-known black serial killers are now serving life terms. So obviously these people are known as serial killers, so they killed a lot of people, and they are now serving life terms. So they were arrested at one point, and nothing happened to them. Obviously, they weren't gunned down. However, anyway, let me proceed. While white people represent about 58% of serial killers, black people also contribute a significant amount to the list of American serial killers at about 30%. So let's even examine that, okay? If I'm not mistaken, I think the white population here in the States is somewhere around 65%. And the black population is somewhere in the neighborhood of 13%. So we just examined the number from a percentage perspective. You see that whites are actually underrepresented when it comes to serial killings, and blacks are overrepresented. So there is an issue. Any serial killing, any murder, any crime like that is problematic, no question about it. And the reason I bring these facts up, I don't sit back, as I said in the beginning of the video, just wanting to be controversial. But there are so many lies that are being told in our society today in order to divide us and to make white people look like the most evil of all people and look like the enemy. And as a God-fearing man, I cannot sit back idly knowing the sin that lies in the heart of every man, woman, and child, the sin nature that impacts all of us, and let folks continue to tell these lies that are only used to divide and cause anger and tension and used to vilify an entire group of people. Find that one individual, deal with him, or that group of individuals, deal with them that are actually out there doing the crime, actually out there harming people. But this broad sweep, broad stroke that is going on in our culture today of blaming white people for every problem that has ever existed in the history of our world is insane. It is stupid. And it's a lie, period. It's a lie. Every group, regardless of where they live, what their color is, has been responsible for some heinous acts in history, throughout our history. So I get a little heated when I see anybody being made to look worse than they really are. It really bugs me. All right, let me get going here. Who is the most famous black serial killer? We're right here in this paragraph. How did they commit their murders? Here are some of the most notable black serial killers in America. Just read a little bit. Samuel Little was a black serial killer who confessed to murdering 93 people, mostly women. Now, I just kind of glossed over that. Samuel Little was a black serial killer who confessed to murdering 93 people, mostly women, and was convicted in 2012 for the murder of Caroline Elford, Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson Everett. In 2018, he was convicted for the murder of Denise Christie brothers. Samuel Little, arguably the most well-known person on the list, regarded as the most prolific and deadly serial killer in American history. Little is also known as the choke and stroke killer. Wow. And Green River killer. That's how I'm familiar with him. Little, the black serial killer and serial rapist, eluded the legal system for over 4 decades, despite being apprehended numerous times. Little claimed to have killed 93 people across 19 states between 1970 and 2005, despite only being convicted of 50 murders. Wow. The bulk of the victims were women. The serial killer Little was apprehended in 2012 after the LAPD linked him to 2 unsolved murders. In 2014, he was condemned to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole. Samuel Little died December 2020 at the age of 80. And there he is. Confessed to killing 93 people, the vast majority of them women, taken into custody, arrested, clearly without incident. Which brings me back to my primary topic. Once again, feel free to use some of this information here as we progress. All right, let's move on here. Henry Louis Wallace, number 2 on the list, also known as the Taco Bell Strangler. Now, some of these guys I've never even heard of before until I started doing a little bit of research here. Is an American serial killer who killed 10 women in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is awaiting execution at Central Prison in Raleigh. Now, I don't know if this has been updated, so I don't know if these guys are dead or not. Some of these guys that I'm going to be talking about, but as of when this article came out, it said he was still awaiting execution. He was tied to 10 murders by stabbing and or strangulation. When Wallace was arrested in 1994, he made a full confession to the police. And this is even going back quite a bit, almost 20, actually more than almost 30 years. He was found guilty of 9 of the murders, and he is suspected to having killed more. He's serving his time on death row. Born November 4th, 1965 in Barnwell, South Carolina. Henry Lewis is 56 years old as of 2021. So unless something happened unless something happened recently, he's still awaiting execution. Wayne Bertram Williams is an American serial killer now serving a life sentence for the 1981 killing of 2 men in Atlanta, Georgia. Police think he is responsible for at least 24 of the 30 Atlanta child murderers that occurred between 1979 and 1981. Now, I can recall that. I remember how, because I was a kid at the time, I can remember all the controversy and discussions of what was going on. I think there's some people that think that he wasn't the one who did it. I don't know. God only knows ultimately. And him, Samuel Little, or Wayne Williams rather, whether if he's in his right mind, they're the ones who ultimately know what really went down. But he was tried and convicted. So that's not a good sign. Most importantly, even though he was suspected as the Atlanta child murderer, he was taken into custody without incident. I'm going to read one more and then we will, I'll check out the chat, see what y'all have to say. This claim is supported by the theory that the unsolved murders seemed to stop once Williams was arrested. However, Williams has never been charged for these murders and continues to claim to be innocent. For the murders of victims Nathaniel Carter and Jimmy Rain, Williams was sentenced to 2 life sentences. Now 61 years old, he's currently serving a sentence in Georgia. Number 4, Chester Turner. Chester is one of the convicted black serial killers. Well, obviously, he's on the list. On April 30th, 2007, he was convicted of the murders of 10 women in LA and was found guilty of the murders of the unborn child of one of his victims, obviously pregnant woman he killed. He was convicted of 4 additional murders on June 19th, 2014. So he was found guilty death of, back up. He was convicted for the murder of 10 women. I don't know if these 4 is in addition, or is this the total? Anyway, he was convicted of 4 additional murders on June 14, 2014. No, in 2007, he was convicted for 10. In 2014, he was convicted for 4 more. He was imprisoned on rape charges after attacking but not killing a woman in 2002. In 2014, he was sentenced to 4 more murders and given another death sentence. He's linked to murders and is currently other murders and is currently on death row. So, unless I'm doing my math wrong, looks like 18 murders. Sheesh. Let's take a little pause here, y'all. Let me go back. But obviously, again, dude was arrested, taken into custody without incident. There he is, sitting in prison. All right, let's swing back to the chat, see what y'all got to say. Every time I do one of these lives, I get these weird Russian comments here. Somebody's trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do. Anyway, the most prolific of all serial killers, if I can talk, would be the Grim Reaper, who claimed to have killed over 25 and claimed he killed over 100 before he died in 2020. I will watch later on video. Okay, do your thing, Zija. Thanks for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it. Wayne Williams stands out from my childhood. Yeah, man. I mean, because you were up in New York. I was right next door in New Jersey, man, and that was like such a big deal. Everybody was talking about it, and I can recall how everybody was freaking out during the Son of Sam murders when David Berkowitz was going around doing this thing. Man, I remember that freaked me out. And he was proud of it. Which one are you talking about? The Grim Reaper? The Green River Killer was Gary Ridgway. I think that's right. I think I did come across him. Maybe the article got the names mixed up. The Atlanta child murders. I remember they made the made-for-TV movie with James Earl Jones, I believe. Yeah, I don't remember that. Got you, Diane. Talking about the Grim Reaper. Yeah, I think, and we've only been through what, 5? We've only made it through 5 names, 4 names. And there's 16 more. And I'm not even going to work my way through the entire list. But I want to make a strong case that this claim is complete and utter garbage. Every day, the police come in contact with, I would say, close to 1 million people nationwide a day. Over the course of a year, the United States, the police in the United States make somewhere between 10 and 11 million arrests. So that's a lot in comparison to the number of shootings that take place over the course of a year, roughly 1,000 every year. Those numbers don't even correlate. It's just a stupid argument. And I really want to hit that point home. I really want to hit that point home. All right, let's check out this guy here. Paul DeRosso. He murdered 7 young women in the southeastern United States between 1997 and 2003. German authorities suspected he may have killed several local women when he was stationed there with the U.S. Army during the early 90s. Wow. Paul DeRosso, sometimes known as the Cabbie Killer, unlike the other black serial killers on the list, was only convicted of 1 murder, but was suspected of murdering others. DeRosso was a taxi driver in Jacksonville, Florida, who befriended his victims before murdering them. He reportedly raped and strangled his victims in Georgia and Florida over the period of 6 years. DeRosso was caught in 2003 and condemned to death by lethal injection in Jacksonville, Florida. for the 1999 murder of Tyresa Mack. Durasu's trial, prosecutors declined to charge him with any further killings. Maybe there was a plea bargain. I'm not sure. In 2017, his death sentence was thrown out by the Florida Supreme Court and ordered him to face a new hearing. Durasu is currently sitting on death row in Jacksonville. Again, arrested without incident. Derek Todd Lee, also known as a Baton Rouge serial killer, was an American serial killer between 1992 and 2003. Lee murdered 7 women in the Baton Rouge area. Prior to his murder charges, Lee had been arrested for stalking women and charging them and watching them in their homes. Derek Lee was only convicted of murdering 2 women, one of whom he bludgeoned and stabbed more than 80 times. Wow. He is thought to have been responsible for 7 additional murders that took place between 1998 and 2003. Todd Lee was sentenced to death for his horrific crimes, but he died in the hospital where he was taken for emergency treatment in 2016. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a little more digging, and I'll comment on it on my Facebook page and Instagram, places like that, for any of y'all who follow me. If you don't, make sure you come follow me. Make sure you subscribe here if you're watching me on YouTube, or just subscribe on YouTube anywhere. Give me a follow on Facebook, whether it be my own personal Facebook page at Eric L. Muldrow or at my Code Red Conversations page. So give me a follow, because I do plan on going in, doing a bit more research on these topics. I'm thinking in a lot of these cases, there's a plea bargain that happens where these guys say, okay, you admit to guilt in the murder of this individual, we won't charge you for the other murders, and then you'll just be facing a life sentence. Or hopefully, in their mind, they hope to get a deal where instead of getting the death penalty, they'll get a life sentence. And that's our court system. It's not perfect, but I'd rather have this system than any other that I'm aware of. All right. Carl Eugene Watts, also known by his nickname Coral, was an American black serial killer dubbed the Sunday Morning Slasher between 1974 and 1982. Carl Eugene Watts murdered over a dozen women across the nation. Watts either stabbed, strangled, or drowned his victims. It was not until August of 1982 that Watts' reign of terror ended. In 2007, Watts was sentenced to 2 life sentences for the murders of Gloria Steele in 1974 and Helen Dutcher in 1979. Watts confessed to 12 additional murders in Texas, but was given immunity by the court. In the same year he received his sentence, Watts died due to prostate cancer at 53 in a Michigan hospital. Lorenzo Gilliard, also known as a Kansas City Strangler, is an American serial killer, a former trash company supervisor. Gilliard is believed to have raped and murdered at least 13 women and girls from 1977 to 1993. He was convicted of 6 counts of murder in March 16th, 2007. 9, Roberta Elder. Among the black serial killers is also a woman. That's really rare from what I've seen. By the time Roberta Elder was arrested in the late summer of 1952, she'd already murdered at least 14 people, perhaps more. Her motive? Money. Elder had life insurance policies on each victim, with herself as a sole beneficiary. Now, didn't she think that somebody would find her? That's about as ignorant as you can get. Her weapon of choice, arsenic. Like most female serial killers, Elder preferred to administer poison to her victims while seeming to care for them. I think there's one known as the Black Widow, who was a nurse who did something similar to that. Wow. Elder was caught and sentenced to life in prison on the grounds that she poisoned her husband, despite the fact that all the evidence was circumstantial. Interesting. Let's read number 10. Craig Price. Craig Chandler Price is also another black serial killer. He operated between the ages of 13 and 15 in Warwick, Rhode Island. He was arrested in 1989 for the killings of a mother and her two kids in his neighborhood, as well as the death of another woman 2 years prior. Originally tried as a minor, wow. Price was scheduled to be released when he turned 21, but he was held in prison on other charges. In 2017, he was given a 25-year sentence for the attempted murder of an inmate. I'll read it. Number 11. Anthony Edward Sowell is a serial killer and rapist known as the Cleveland Strangler. He was arrested in October 2009 after the bodies of 11 women were discovered by the police at his home, in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. His victims fit the profile of women who engaged in sex work and drugs. You know, it's really weird, especially some of these serial killers who are around in more recent times. I don't remember ever hearing about these guys. Some of them, like I mentioned, the guy who was believed to had participated in the Atlanta child murders. But most of these dudes, I ain't never even heard of before. Sowell led women to his house with the promise of alcohol and drugs and then killed them. Sowell operated between 2007 and 2009 when the police eventually caught him. Police were tipped off by a woman who managed to escape Sowell and reported him for rape. Sowell was arrested in 2009 after police discovered 10 decomposing bodies in his house. Sowell died February 2021 from a terminal illness at Ohio's Franklin Medical Center at 61. What do y'all think about all this, y'all? I mean, it's disturbing, absolutely. But aside from that obvious emotion, man, it's just wild. Do you think there's something to the idea that the media, and maybe I was just out of the loop. I don't want to assume a conspiracy theory, but maybe I was just out of the loop. But I just don't recall hearing a lot of these encounters, about a lot of these serial killers. We know that there's media bias. There's no question about it. I talk about it all the time. I did a live a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, addressing the problem with media bias. Could it be that it just wasn't spoken of? Because there are news stories, there are news reports where you'll hear there's some people will withhold information because they don't want to feed a quote unquote stereotype. I was watching Larry Elder on YouTube a few days ago, and he said that, man, who was it? It was some social media head or someone like that. Might have been someone who's, I don't know if it's social media or a news network head, or I can't recall who it was. But he literally said or admitted that he doesn't share some of the information about the crime that comes from aspects of the Black community because he doesn't want to feed the stereotype. So again, we are reminded that we are not being fed all the truth. We're not being given all the information. So is it possible that folks are withholding this information? We're just not hearing about it because they don't want to quote unquote feed the stereotype? I think it's very possible. Just my thoughts. I regularly hear the claim that an unarmed Black man gets killed for just a traffic stop. Dante Wright, which we all know it was more to it than just a traffic stop, but we didn't hear that initially. While a white mass murderer, Dylan Roof, gets taken alive and is bought lunch at Burger King. Right. When I first started, I started talking about that initially. But here I went through 10 cases where serial killers were running rampant, killing some people, killing dozens of people. But they're arrested. Some are still serving time in prison right now, or some ultimately ended up dying or got the death penalty. But it demonstrates that they were taken into custody and they went through the legal system. They weren't just gunned down simply because they're black. There we go. I always point out the vast majority of people who are killed, black or white, resisted, refused to cooperate. Whereas Dylann Roof pulled over, handed the cops his driver's license, and told them who he was. He cooperated fully. IOW. I know what is that? Help me out with that. I'm not hip to all the little shortcuts, internet texting shortcuts. In one way, I don't know. But that's the thing. I made a video here. I might find it and put the link in the chat. But I made a video a few years ago that talks about the fact that your demeanor upon coming into contact with the police is what matters more than anything. Matter of fact, let me try to track down this video. I tell people that time and time again. Some folks listen, most don't. But when it's all said and done, if I get stopped by the police and then I throw up my hands and I'm ready to fight, or I pull out a weapon and they can't determine what it is because it's late at night and it's a dynamic situation that happens rapidly, that happens quickly, that's a world of difference between that and a mass shooter, serial killer being stopped by the police who is completely cooperative. That's all that matters, y'all. Jacob Blake, Rayshard Brooks, Michael Brown, Alton Sterling, all of these dudes, and these are just the ones off the top of my head. All of these dudes resisted the police. And when it was all said and done, they paid the ultimate price because they refused to cooperate. That's the unfortunate facts of the matter. See if I can share this link here real quick, y'all. I'm going through on my YouTube channel, trying to find a link. YouTube put a restriction on here, so you have to click on that because they deemed it a bit too violent. There we go. Posting a link in there. Posting a link for y'all, I believe. We'll get there in a minute. But that's it. As I was saying, it matters more what you do when you're stopped by the police. I don't care what your crime is. There's a way cops are expected to respond. If you have a compliant suspect who is a child molester, it doesn't give the officer the right to shoot him or to beat him up. As disgusting and as evil as a crime as that is, we have to operate within the law. You have to. People don't like to hear that, but that's just the reality. Let me see here. It doesn't fit the narrative that only white people are bad. Right. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't hear a lot of this stuff. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of information is withheld. There was a report done on a local news station. I even think Tucker Carlson spoke on it, where he talked about the BART system in California, the rapid transit system. There were a lot of arrests and a lot of attacks going on there, a lot of violent crime. But the BART system in and of themselves chose not to share video footage of the suspects. Why? Because they did not want to promote stereotypes. You have an unsafe place. You have a place where crimes are being committed, where people are being robbed at gunpoint, attacked, violently. But that doesn't matter. Their biggest concern is making sure that they're woke and that they're politically correct. and that they don't promote a stereotype. It's insane. So knowing that, why should you really trust anything that you hear on the news or on TV, especially coming from certain media sources who are more prone to want to be politically correct? You shouldn't. That's my mindset. What's up, George? What you got? Perhaps one reason why California has so many serial killers is they refuse to use the gas chamber, and even though it is still available. One thing is for sure, in today's forensic science climate, a mistaken conviction is almost impossible, and the death penalty stops recidivism. Hardened criminals may not be deterred by it, but I'm sure most other people are. Yeah, that's possible. I don't know. I wonder. I definitely think that there's an argument to be made that when the crime isn't, the punishment isn't going to be too tough, that people have a tendency to commit more crime. We're seeing that happen all over our country right now. But the massive crime spree that's taking place, the increase in crime, especially in these more liberal, left-leaning cities and states. So there is a lot of truth to the idea that if people know they're not going to get punished more, they're going to go out there and do more. It's the old give them an inch, they'll take a mile. That is extremely true. A common fact often, if not always, left out of the narrative of serial killers would be the gangster who has killed numerous people in drive-bys, ambushes, and other ways, but because of the narrative, left off the list. You hit it on the head, bro. And there's actually an article I have here. I think it's by Colin Flaherty. It's on the Gateway Pundit, where he talks about, I think he goes into detail of just that fact. There was something I read not that long ago that went into that detail. Drive-bys are, and I said that earlier, drive-bys are almost totally ignored. Almost totally ignored in this whole equation. People have a tendency to think mass shooter going into a school, shooting up the school, or going into a church, or a movie theater, or a mall. But they don't think about all the people gunned down. But nowadays, you're hearing it more often. I get a lot of local news links in some of the hot spots across the country. Philly, Atlanta, Houston, LA, Chicago, Baltimore. And you hear about mass shootings all the time. And I'm sure, sadly, a lot of them they never end up finding out who did it, because the whole snitches get stitches mantra. But it's unfortunate, and it's real that there is a problem. And it's an aspect of this whole argument that is typically ignored. In other words, thanks, Frank. Yeah. Yeah, I posted the link to my one video where I go into detail talking about violent attacks and stuff like that. Posted it twice, I see. I guess I'm just making sure y'all get it. I'm going to read over a couple more of these serial killers. I think I read about Anthony Soule with the 10 decomposing bodies in his home. I'll read 13 and 14. Mark Goudeau was a black serial killer, kidnapper, thief, and rapist. Goudeau was involved in one of the two simultaneously occurring serial killer cases which terrorized the Phoenix metro area between 2005 and 2006. Also known as the Baseline Killer, I actually think I might have heard about this one. Goudeau was accused of 9 murders, 15 sexual assaults, and a variety of other offenses in the Phoenix region. Through DNA evidence, he was tied to a decades-old rape in 2017. He was condemned to a total of 438 years in jail for several life sentences, obviously. Number 14, Deborah Brown. Another woman on the list of killers. In 1984, Brown and her accomplice and lover, Alton Coleman, perpetrated a spate of killings. The pair went on a 53-day crime spree that took place in 6 states. Tamika Turks was murdered in Gary, Indiana, which led to Brown and Coleman's arrest. Turks, 7, wow, that hurt my heart, was strangled to death by the pair after being lured into the woods with her aunt, Annie Hillard, on a trip to the candy store. My mind can't even wrap my mind around that level of evil. That is just so sickening. Hillard managed to escape the attacks in the woods and called the cops right away. The murderous pair had already gone on to other crimes, including murder, robbery, and kidnapping, before Turks' body was discovered. So sad. Coleman was placed to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, despite the fact that apprehending them would take weeks. Coleman and Brown were involved in 8 murders, 7 rapes, 3 kidnappings, 14 armed robberies during their 53-day criminal rampage. Brown was condemned to death in 1986. However, the sentence was vacated in 2018 owing to Brown's mental impairment. Until the change in sentence, Brown was the sole woman on Indiana's death row. Sheesh. Man, oh man. Well, y'all, we just made it through a list of 14 serial killers. Once again, all of which, let me scroll back to the top here, all of which did time in prison. All of which faced the criminal justice system, none of whom were shot and gunned down. None. So feel free to share this video on this topic. I think, especially my condensed version, you can share this one. I think this one will be very helpful too. But once I tighten it up and we just make our way through the list of killers, I think you'll have a strong case. You'll make a strong argument that that ridiculous concept of the racist system, and I'm not saying the system doesn't have its problems, and you can't find or won't find occasions where racism is on display. But I would say overall, in whole, here in 2022, that's just not the case. It isn't. We're not in the 60s or 70s or even 80s anymore. We've come a long way as a society, as a system. And when we see problems, we're dealing with them. So I appreciate y'all stopping by, joining me today. I kept this one short just because I wanted to, just make sure that I stay on track, and my voice is getting a little rough today. So I appreciate y'all bearing with me. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Make sure you go to my website, CodeRedConversations.com. Check out what we got going on over there, in particularly the merchandise area. Feel free to support what it is that we're doing. I got some cool t-shirts, cool hats, beanies, all kinds of stuff. So check out CodeRedConversations.com. I would greatly appreciate y'all supporting what it is that we do here. Dwayne got something posted up over here. What you got over here, bro? Black Widow Killer. And okay, that might be a good one to check out, man. Asian Japan Black Widow Killer. Yeah, I never heard of that one. That's news to me. Thank you for your video. Hey, Karen, and I appreciate you and your comments and views. Once again, I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate you supporting me. My mindset is simply to just have a conversation. Let's not make let's not just jump to conclusions. Let's not just assume that, well, we feel this way because we see it more often. We see this happening more often, so it must be the case. People need to realize that even though we have 24-hour news cycles, we don't know even close to a third of the crime that takes place here in the United States. Not even a tenth. I would say probably less than 1% makes it across our news feed, makes it across our timeline of all the crime that takes place here in the United States. Why is it that people assume that if CNN or MSNBC, or if they see it in The Root, or if they hear about it on Vox, that it must be the only way things are going down? We need to We need to think more broadly than that. It just, the limited way of thinking that so many people have can be very frustrating. Thanks again for your time and information share. Let's seek to break the narrative. That's my goal, brother. That's my goal. And so yeah, once again, I definitely plan on us catching up, man, and so we can work on some of the other projects that we're trying to do when it comes to breaking the narrative. Very true. Very true. It can be very frustrating, but I also understand that I don't have the highest of expectations for the world we're living in. I know it's a sinful world, a fallen and broken world, but I'm doing my best. I'm trying to do my part to share the information and to at least get people to at least consider the idea that there may be another perspective. That's all I want to do, because thankfully someone shared some information with me and more information, and then I was forced to confront the facts. And I had to say, hey, okay, what's going on here? There's more to a lot of things that I've taken for granted or that I've assumed to be true throughout my lifetime. And when you come into contact with people like Thomas Sowell, Walter E. Williams, the shout out to Will and Mickey Addison and Abraham Hamilton with American Family Radio, and I can go on and on to people whose ministry or whose organizations impacted my thinking and challenged me to examine things that, man, I'm telling you, there were things that I was like, I was kind of frustrated when I first started reading history and started understanding that there were so many things that were withheld and I had never heard before. It kind of got a little angry, but then I just started understanding. I was just reminded of where we are as a society, that we are in a sinful world, and that I need to take that into consideration, not be so angry at times. Pray for these folks, because that's what they need mostly. And realize that there are people out there who are intentionally trying to manipulate the information, and because they want you to think, believe, and vote a certain way. And if they can keep people angry, especially Black folks, then, because, man, I tell you what, we will be tap dancing our way up to the election machines and voting Democrat all day long. They could treat us like crap throughout history, as they've always done, and we will still be there to support them. And it drives me nuts, but that's a conversation for another day. You ever communicate with Chief Brown and seen his YouTube channel, Consider Culture? Yeah, I think I hit him up on Facebook. We're friends on Facebook, but I haven't seen much from him lately. And it's funny you brought him up, because I was actually wondering whether he's even active anymore on YouTube, because I hadn't seen a video from him on YouTube. I know he was more active on Instagram, but I haven't seen anything from him on YouTube in a long time. I know he was dealing with some family issues. I think there was something going on in his personal life. Yeah, Consider Culture is phenomenal. Phenomenal content. Oh, yeah, you just said it. He drops his YouTube production to run a business. Yep, that's it. So, yeah, good stuff. Good content. But once again, y'all, as always, I appreciate y'all dropping by and supporting a brother as he's seeking to try to impact our society, try to make some changes here. I love y'all. I appreciate the support. And before I roll out, as always, stay safe. God bless. And make sure you join the conversation.
Bye.